my plan is responsible and fair. It focuses the benefit on middle class and working families.
Can't do it. So that's not even a discussion. Not everybody realizes that. But the president can only postpone, delay, but not forgive.
It's about making sure we're taking care of Americans and investing in our economy and in our people.
Well, the president's plan, $10,000 debt, student debt forgiveness for people making $125,000 or less, $250,000 for a family, and then $20,000 forgiveness for anyone with a Pell Grant. The former head of the Economic Council of Advisors for President Obama, Jason Furman, tweeted this: pouring roughly $500 billion of gasoline on the inflationary fire that's already burning is reckless. Doing it while going well beyond one campaign promise, $10K of student loan relief, and breaking another, all proposals paid for, is even worse. He goes on. In that tweet thread, let's bring in our panel. Morgan Ortagus, former State Department spokesperson, former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer, and Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist. Ari, your thoughts of this? Obviously, there are political implications here, and there's thoughts on both sides.
Brett, I just think this is wrong on every level. Is there any one of us who would want to teach our children that when you ask for a loan, the proper procedure is not to pay it back and then expect it to be just dismissed as if money is for free? When you ask for a loan, you have a fundamental obligation to pay back that loan. And the government should not do this. Now, why are they doing this one? Why not taxpayers who have loans out to the IRS? The IRS has told a lot of taxpayers that you owe us money and we're charging you interest on it. Should the government dismiss those? What about people who owe car companies for their car rentals, for their car loans? What about people who own mortgage debt? Should that be forgiven? No. The answer is that when you apply for a loan, you pay back your loan. And for the government to be the one dismissing this is just irresponsible, and it's also a fundamental redistribution of wealth from high school students, people with a high school diploma, to college students. It doesn't get more wrong.
All right, Leslie, I want to get your response. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, you heard her in that montage. That was a year ago, saying the president doesn't have this authority. Today, she said something different, saying the authority was found. I want to read this Education Department Office of Legal Counsel memo to then Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, in which they write, we believe the Secretary does not have the statutory authority to cancel, compromise, discharge, or forgive on a blanket or mass basis principal balances of student loans and or to materially modify the repayment amounts of or terms thereof, suggesting that would have to be Congress that does that. This president says this is an emergency basis through the Department of Education because of COVID, even as its CDC is kind of dialing back on the guidance about COVID and the emergency status of it. Your thoughts, Leslie?
The emergency status and that one word make it a game changer as to whether the president has the authority, Education Department, without Congress. You know, I don't always agree with Ari, but I will agree with one thing. Please, please wipe out those debts that we, myself included, owe the IRS. But in all seriousness, the president campaigned specifically and tweeted specifically about this dollar amount with student loan forgiveness, and he was elected. 1, 2. Less than 2 months ago, 55% of the American people supported student loan forgiveness, and on top of it, this specific dollar amount. As a matter of fact, Republicans 18 to 34 years of age also support this. So this isn't something the president's doing against the will of the people. So let's talk about pushback. It's never going to be good enough for some in my own party on the left and others who want the slate clean or they want $50,000. Something is better than nothing to them, I say. And then on the other side of the aisle, I'm sorry, Republicans have signed off on $2 trillion to give tax breaks to the wealthy, and they didn't blink an eye on that. So I know there was going to be pushback on both sides. The president is not only keeping a promise, he's trying to help those that have been hurt along this pandemic. And Janet Yellen said the money they would use can infuse the economy and can help with consumerism for them to buy, you know, more food, more clothes, cars, homes, etc.
Susan Rice, the domestic policy advisor, used that same pushback on the hypocrisy point about Republicans and tax cuts. You know, every time we get to an issue that we've talked about before, and student loan debt forgiveness has come up a lot, we like to go back to our archives and look to our late colleague Charles Krauthammer and what he may have said about this. We found one. This is from 2013.
It's a classic example of a compassion, the unintended consequences of compassion. It's a good idea until you realize, you showed earlier on the show, how much tuition has increased. And the reason is you get a huge amount of money from the federal government that the colleges understand, supply and demand, allow them to increase their tuition. You showed that public institutions increased tuition by 27% since '07, and the more expensive private colleges about half of that. So essentially, it's inflating the budgets of universities. Everybody understands that.
Yeah, I just put up a graphic here, and that, Morgan, that's college tuition and fees since 1980, 1,200% increase over that 40-year span, while inflation increased only about 232%. So your thoughts on all of this, Morgan?
Well, first, thanks for letting me go after the legend, Charles Krauthammer. No pressure there, Brett.
That's right.
Listen, if I can take a little bit more cynical view at this, if you look at voters 18 to 29 in the 2020 election, about 60% of those voters voted for Joe Biden. In June, a poll was done of that same age group, and he was at around a 22% approval rating. So that's a 40-point drop from a key constituent group. You look at Latino voters, similarly, probably another 40% drop in approval rating there. Similarly, Black American voters down to 60% approval rating there. They went overwhelmingly for Biden. So when you go through and you look at this from a 2020 midterm election perspective, it's clear that they are trying to throw a bone to many voters to try to get them back, to try to get them to show up at the polls. But I think it's going to backfire on them because it's going to undermine the Inflation Reduction Act, which did nothing to actually reduce inflation. And it's going to be another $1 trillion potentially of spending on the books within a matter of weeks at a time when our economy just can't take it. No common sense economist would say that this will work.
Ari, another student debt, total outstanding student debt graphic. Only 26% of households with student debt have a graduate degree, but loans associated with graduate degrees account for nearly 50% of the total outstanding student loan debt. So just from a pure political perspective, aren't you kind of making a bunch of people mad? In the same time, it's a knife-edge decision here politically, but there seems like a big group that either didn't go to college or paid off their debts.
Yeah, that's why I think this is less a partisan issue than a right or wrong issue. It's also that transfer of wealth, as I said earlier, from people who have just a high school degree to college degree people and people with master's degrees. Most Americans don't go to college, Brett. Most Americans have to pay their bills. So what this does, it says to most Americans, there's a sliver, better educated than you, that you're going to start to pay for the bills that they incurred. It's just wrong. You don't do this to our children. It's how you buy people off, pay people off, and hopefully win a midterm election.
Panel, thank you. We'll follow it, see where it goes.